Hey, here in Chapter 8, I think it's a lot more stuff that you're going to like and be able to grab onto and make sense to you. And some of the topics like parenting and homelessness and, Head Start, title, child abuse, bullying, suicide, substance abuse, all things that you're more familiar with, be more reality. And it all deals with working with parents. It's a part of teaching that we don't tell you about, that a lot of you are called to the teaching field. You can't wait to work with kids, but you get us with it. The parents, lots of us, and our attitudes and habits, as you've picked up from listening to me, are way more vast and different than kids, and yet you get all that too. And I never think there's enough time to get to know teachers and work with them, and so it's kind of an ongoing thing. But it's a big part of teaching that we don't prepare you well enough for. You'll take a course actually in working with parents, but this is your introduction to it, working with the families and parents. And it looks a little bit like some of the others, but it's stuff that you can grab onto that'll be meaningful to you. And I hope at the end of this you have some insight that you didn't have to begin with. Chapter 8, Families. Chapter 8, Students and their Families. Here's the learning outcomes, and I have these on the wiki site also. But it's about different backgrounds, different ages. Really a pretty good go at it here. I found this interesting right away. Today's families changed dramatically in the last 60 years, and I'd say more than that. In the 50s, the norm was a working father and mother at home with 2 more school-age children. Today, we have few mothers remain at home until their children finish high school, and I would say fewer. I guess in my world there's more of that's still in that 60s model, but for the most part it seems like in our schools that we approach it as if that's not the norm. That's not the case. I felt in a lot of cases, like for example the first school my kids went to, that it was really set up for that model for those mothers that were at home, and so that was kind of a challenge. But look at all the different things today, and I'm going to ask you to bring these in here. Significant shifts in family culture in the 50s, single-parent home, stay-at-home dads, other arrangements. Here, I want you to bring all these arrangements in. This is number 1, and here they are. Listen to this. Mothers working with fathers stay at home, that one with children, that one's there. Single-parent families, families with 2 working parents, that's us, this family. Remarried parents, childless families, childless marriages, families with adopted children, gay and lesbian parents, extended families, grandparents raising grandchildren, and unmarried couples raising children. And so this would be number 1. Here is all those dynamics that we just mentioned from page 198 on today's families. Okay, that's number 1. I want you to include all those in there so you have a handle of it. To keep the diversity of families, I say, so not only culture, but the families are very diverse from what they were 40 and 50 years ago. The emphasis here, of course, will be on culture, but the family has dramatically changed in the way we communicate. Parents are generally older than in the past because they marry later, and I'm going to push on that a little bit. The reason isn't always because they marry later. Part of it is that they're just putting off childbearing. We're still having children at a young age. Now, marrying doesn't have as near as much to do with having children. You'll see the statistics a little bit later, how many children are born to unmarried people. So marrying later, to me, doesn't have the effect on that. It's just overall people delaying childbirth. 1 in 4 of today's young people under 30 years of age has been married. Okay. And in your world, that maybe seems a little off, but 1 in 4. I was 26 when I got married. I was almost 40 when my oldest was born. So there was a gap. So we probably would still destroy this curve here, this bell-shaped curve. Most men and women work a number of years before marrying. However, they do not always stay married to the same person. And I say, and part of it is we couple up, we move in together long before we marry. And so I think this is a little misleading here about we work before we get married. I know lots of couples that are starting their families before they're married. They move in at the same age as we always did. As my parents got married, both were 20, I believe, or my dad was 21. And I say now people just move in together and start their families within a couple of years of that before they marry. I've attended, as have you, lots of weddings where the children, the little children, are at the wedding. I had a niece that had 2 children with the same man before she got married to him. So anyway, it just changes dynamics of families. And it says, of course, and as you're well aware of, we don't stay married to that same person. Less than half of the marriages, not half the people, half the marriages ended in divorce. And so it continually changed. And then it gets a little more complicated, as you know, when we remarry somebody else that has kids. Parents who live in separate households but have joint custody, a step-parent, other family members are non-related. Of course, non-related for the most part means mom's boyfriend living there, which we have too. 7, this highlight here, 7 in 10 children under 18 live with 2 parents. 7 in 10, that's high, but some of that is not their mom and dad. It often can be a stepfather or stepmother. But still, that's a higher number than I would have expected. That's 7 out of 10. Almost 1 in 4 U.S. children lives with his or her mother only. Okay, and again, I thought it would have been higher than that. 1 in 4, which is 25%. And again, I'm going to ask you to bring these in here of these different statistics on page 199. This will be number 2. And again, the reason I'm having you do this is I just want you to have a nice set of data here about what these family structures look like. So I want you to start it up here about marrying later. This one here, 1 in 10 live with 2 parents, even though it might be stepfather. 1 in 4 only live with their mother. Here's another one I want you to bring in. 3% live with their father. And African American children are more likely than children from other groups to live with a single mother. Okay, and ideally it would be advantageous for children to have 2 caring and loving parents to nurture them. However, children from all types of families are academically successful in school, become well-adjusted adults. And that's what comes to you, as you, as the teacher, do not get to judge this. You do not get to weigh this. Those children come to your class regardless of these family structures. They deserve and demand your love and respect and encouragement just as anybody else. And this chapter is going to make a case for that. But I'm a little put out the insinuation that you wouldn't put here. I'm going to push on this more later, but that's the insinuation throughout this chapter, is that you wouldn't do this. That family, it's not the type of family that disadvantages students to make it difficult for them to adjust. The factor that is most correlated with such disadvantage is economic well-beings of the family. Those in poverty are more likely than their affluent peers to have problems in school. And I'm telling you, that it'll be the theme through the whole chapter. And so again, I want you to put that here also. All those things here. The most likely to have problems in school, all sorts of problems, are from the economically disadvantaged homes. And again, still, you do not have the right to judge that. And those kids are going to need you more than the others. And I don't care if you're teaching high school classes or kindergarten, those kids will have more challenges and deserve you more. Okay. Let's go into parenting. This is more here. Teachers must respect, value diversity of families, not family types impacts teachers' expectations. This is what I say. Your expectations are the same, and that is to lift up kids. And my kids need this too. They need a different kind, but my kids need connection to their teachers now. As they're older than they did before. And there's no doubt it's more of a challenge for you to connect with people that are not like you and not like me, but they all need that. And I say even the middle-income white kids like mine need that connection to their teachers, but I think some of these other kids need it more. All right, parenting, they sets the stage for future learning. Reading and limiting television exposure improves literacy. Monitoring, learning have impact. And teachers have collaboration necessary. And it talks about here is not all those different things, that come involved. Often parents draw from their own experience as children and adults. However, it's different today. And it talks about how it's different than it was a few years ago. Cell phones, textings, avatars, chat rooms, MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, wikis, tweeting, all didn't exist not just too long ago. And I agree with that to a certain extent. That really has changed it. I still think experiences we draw on from when we were growing up still are valuable, but it's different now because of technology. But it's the most critical thing as parents, and my point here is you don't get to change that. And that's to me, we overemphasize this. Nobody, everybody knows that, but I worked with tons of families that I couldn't get parents engaged. I couldn't get parents to step up. And I taught in middle school, a low-income middle school, and so a lot of these parents have really formed ingrained habits by then of not participating in their children's schooling, and for a variety of reasons. I could spend 2 days telling you about that. But nonetheless, they still need you and deserve you through that. This is interesting here. Reading to young children and limiting amount of time watching TV have a strong relationship to reading scores. And you don't ever get to see the stats from that. You see it's not cited here, but most of us believe it to be true. And by age 4, children with professional parents have a much larger vocabulary. And of course, what that comes from, also most of the time parents that are from middle income have education and use a bigger vocabulary, and so children pick up on that. And let's go way back to what we've talked about a number of times. Vocabulary is still power. Vocabulary gives you the ability to read and read more fluently. And this is where reading to kids at an early age does. It gives kids vocabulary, gives them words. And what we can't agree on is what to do. What to do with kids come from low-income homes where they don't get that access to good vocabulary, to bigger vocabularies. And again, is it money? I talk about this every chapter. Is it money? Is the inference here that we need to throw money at this? I don't know. And I don't know there's a simple solution. There's not a simple one, or we would have already found it. But it's your awareness. You, the teachers, they're going to make the difference here. That's what you're up against. And again, like I say, you'll quickly pick up on which kids that don't have that vocabulary, don't have that background. So access to such things as books, computers, internet also contribute to academic success. Parent involvement in school activities and ensure the homework is done also correlate with good grades. And again, this is not rocket science. You know that. But my point here is, and going through all this is, if that's not happening in homes, you don't get to change it. You're just changes how you're going to approach things. Teachers need to work together. Parents and teachers need to work together. And then there's economic stress, of course. Families continue to suffer a recent recession. A number of them have lost their jobs or worry about losing their jobs. Teachers report that more students are coming to school hungry. And all I can say to that is my kids would report that also, even though they have breakfast. This is an interesting stat here I have highlighted. 7 in 10 parents and 65% of the students worry about their family having enough money to cover basic needs. And that's, I'd like to know that. So I looked this up, this MetLife study, 2012. Let me just take you there. It's very interesting. First of all, you know who MetLife is. It's an insurance company, and they have quite a long thing here. But they apparently talked to 1,000 teachers, and this is what you do with research. In this whole chapter, they basically embedded. This whole chapter is based on this study. But one of the things I found was interesting in this study is the teachers were paid to participate. They were paid to participate. And what I can't seem to find here is where did they find this cross-section of teachers? Because I got to believe that this group does not represent a cross-section of people, because I go back here and say that seems like a high number. 7 in 10 parents and 65% of students worry about family having enough money to cover basic needs. And again, maybe it's my shallowness, maybe it's my insulation from the real world, but that seems like a very high number. And as I looked at this, I couldn't find where they got this group. They just said cross-section of 1,000 teachers and 500 principals that they asked. And so how does that change things in school? And it's I forget how many pages. It's 100 and some pages here that they find, but this MetLife is exactly the MetLife you think it is. It's the insurance company doing this study. And so I can't quite figure out what their angle is here, but all through it, they have it sprinkled through here. And like I say, I couldn't find exactly how they drew these teachers, but the numbers to me seem a little skewed, and I hope they are, because that seems like a lot to me, that it's 65% of these 1,000 teachers. But I say the teachers were paid to come onto this. I'm going to guess that they really picked these out of low-income schools or certain neighborhoods. I can't imagine it's a cross-section across the country. I think it's dramatically different here in the Plains, but I don't know that to be sure. But I know economic stress is a big thing. 2 in 3 teachers report that the number of students and families needing health and social support has increased over the past years. Yes, the economic downturn in the last 5 years have reduced, districts have reduced and eliminated those services along with after-school programs as part of their budget cutting. In this section, we examine how limited family incomes affect families and schooling of their age. And okay, you look at this MetLife 2012 all through here, that this is their source for all their information. You won't hardly see much beside that. And that's just where they asked these 1,000 teachers that were paid to participate. And yeah, I'm just going to let it go at that. So homelessness, and that's a whole nother thing. Recessions, coming to school hungry, 7 of 10 worry about their family having enough to cover basics. School districts have reduced, eliminated many health and support services. I wish they would have labeled those. As I looked through here, I could not find any place where they labeled what was cut, which I don't, to me it's kind of a blank statement. As I go through here, so that's what comes. But homelessness, here, causes, homeless children, homeless youth, homeless students in school. So I'm just going to come back and just talk about some of those things. That more than 3 million people in the United States are without shelter at some point during a year. And many more families are just a paycheck away from that. Many low-income families spend 50% of the income on rent rather than recommended 30%. And so the point being that it's very hard to find affordable income on low incomes. Include youth, children, people with disabilities, veterans, people using illegal drugs, people with mental health problems, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that was a huge one, is mental health problems. Or people who do not earn enough to rent housing. Life is very rough when living on the streets. Homeless people are physically attacked and suffer disproportionate from health and mental problems, yes. So what is the cause? Cause of homelessness? Yeah, the number one thing is unemployment, of course. And just stuff that they can afford. Growing number in decreasing government support and domestic violence. And again, please show me the stats on that. A job doesn't necessarily guarantee housing, and you would know that. 3 in 10 members of homeless populations have jobs, but employment is part-time or sporadic adults earning wages too low to purchase necessary food, clothing. A full-time minimum wage job often does not provide enough income for a family to rent a one-bedroom home. And the thing I think there, you guys, I don't think it was ever intended. People making minimum wage was never intended. Minimum wage was a training job for young people until they get started in their careers. It's peculiar to me that we're trying to support families on minimum wage jobs. Was never the intent of it. And we can raise that. We can double it. We could double the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, and it would not allow families to support their themselves on that wage, but it would price out a lot of young people out of jobs that wouldn't be able to, people wouldn't hire them because of how high that is. So minimum wage was always a training wage, not a living wage, and now we're trying to make a living wage, and so we take it to it. The decreasing government supports and domestic violence also contribute to a growing number of homeless families. Here in the highlight, homeless families comprise about 1/3 of the homeless population. And so 1/3 of the people that are homeless, and it doesn't always mean live in the streets, it just means they don't have a permanent residence. And figure 8.1, I think, is down here, is who they are. and it gives a biggest one. Homeless mothers who have been physically abused tends to happen. We have lots of shelters, but they don't always access them. So there's a breakdown of who they are. Generally in the late 20s, they have a demographics here. Mother of a homeless family is generally in her late 20s with 2 young children. Over 9 and 10 of them already have been the victims of violent incidences. And again, unless you've been asleep for 25 years, you know this. Homeless mothers are more likely than other mothers to have lived in foster care earlier in their lives. Is that interesting? They're homeless now. They were more likely to be on foster kids when they were growing up. So look at how that's perpetuated from generation to generation. Let me go on here. They and their children suffer from chronic health problems such as asthma, anxiety, and depression. Homelessness is devastating to families who are sometimes separated from partners and their children. Only 65% of homeless mothers live with at least one of their children. Only 65%. In other words, the children are taken away or living someplace else. Often the children get help, and they have some other problems, and that's not broken down here. 7% homeless men, only 7% of them live at least with one of their children. What happens is often this parent is living homeless has some mental health issues, prevents them from caring for the children. So the children are taken into the system, into the government system, and the mother either isn't or refuses to. And this is what often comes up here that we don't talk about is often there's mental issues. The government has changed the regulations so that it's much, much harder to get people committed that have mental health issues. And, there was a time where anybody could get somebody committed and get that help they needed. You could fill out paperwork to get them in there. We found then people abused that system where they were sticking elderly parents in so they could get at their money. So the laws were changed. So now it's very, very hard. So if somebody's mentally ill and they don't want to be committed for treatment, they don't have to be. And this is what I found. I worked with homeless people 25 years ago, and a high percentage of them were mentally ill and absolutely did not want to be part of any kind of a system. For one thing, if you're mentally ill, you often don't know that you have a problem. You think the rest of the world does. Here, homeless children may be placed in foster care or left with relatives or friends while their families are experiencing homelessness. And I say part of that is also these homeless people often are addicts. Doesn't come into the discussion here, but they're often high incidence are addicts, alcoholics, drug addicts, and stuff. So again, why they're not living with one of their children is because the children are taken away because they're addicts. And this goes on to homeless children. More than 1.6 million are homeless at some time during the year. Many suffer from inadequate health and are surrounded by disease. Well, you can imagine if you're out there that's happening. More than 1.6 million children every year night. About 200,000 have no home. Many are staying in shelters at night, doubling in homes and friends and relatives. Nearly half the homeless children are under the age of 6. Homeless youth have this most often homeless because they have run away from home and been released from foster care, and they run away. And I worked with tons of kids that were run away, called CHINs, child in need of supervision. They would just disappear, and sometimes it was things at home were so bad, but more often I saw juveniles that were delinquents, were already addicts, and therefore they wanted to run and feed their addiction. This can be a primary reason, but there's others, and sometimes this can lead to those other problems also. Few homeless youth stay in shelters because of admission policies and other obstacles. Instead, they sleep in abandoned buildings and the streets or with other people, and they have difficulty finding jobs to earn money if they need so. They end up exchanging sex for money, increasing their chance of contracting AIDS or HIV. And of course, anybody, when you get in this realm whatsoever, the first casualty is going to school. The first casualty of it is going to school. And so when you go to school, it can be encompassing. You've got all these things in your life. The last thing you're worried about is going to school. They're not fare well. Their classmates in life or in schools are showing. However, some homeless students are very resilient and able to maintain. Moving frequently is a characteristic of low-income families. With many of them moving to different housing annually or more often, because often they're in subsidized housing. That's a change. A a lot of them it's income-based housing, so you can move in, and as soon as you lose your job, you lose that place. So that it creates a lot of instability, and sometimes you're able to stay in the same school, but sometimes not. And so, of course, that's a ongoing thing. They face barrier regularly attending school, such as lack of transportation, lack of school supplies, lack of clothing. If you're always moving, your clothes don't always keep up with you, and you probably don't have nice clothes. And, of course, a big one that I saw often, too, is poor health. You're not eating regularly, but more so than not eating regularly, I saw kids that weren't sleeping regularly. So then although the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act was passed in '87, eliminated the residency requirement. Homeless children sometimes are not allowed to attend the school that would best serve their needs. Almost 9 in 10 of the nation's homeless students are enrolled in school, although less than 1 in 4 attend regularly. So they're enrolled, they just don't get there, and for these reasons up here. So let me take you back here. I'm going to, let's see, where did we leave off here? We're only on number 3. And I'm going to ask you right here to bring this in here, this McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. There's a big, I found a big thing on it. You link a thing in here and talk about it a little bit. So this is number 3. And that's called the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act. Vento Act, I'm going to call it. Okay, so a link, a hyperlink to it where you found information, and then a little bit more than what's in the textbook about it. And there's just a little point. This is 1987, a little point that it doesn't always do what it's supposed to do. But the alarming part here is 9 out of 10 of the nation's homeless students are enrolled, but less than 4 in 5 attend regularly. So highly concentrated education offers homeless children a chance to academic success. If you have kids that fall in this category, you'll find immediately that it's different. Working with these kids are different. And again, as I said before, if there's ever a group that need you, it's this group here. And my only hope is you don't have a big enough group that you can give more love and attention to them. But they need more, not less, your attention. They're going to be successful in school. Rates of which homeless children were traumatized in their schools, and look at this here. And so I'm going to ask you to bring this in. This will be number 4, and this will be in the clip bin. And this is called 8.2. 8.2. Bring that in and put it right behind your McKinney-Vento Act. So what are some of these programs support these low-income families in your schools? And again, I've worked with every one of these, and I'm just going to give you a quick here. Title I is federal funding to help low-income students. No Child Left Behind said teachers must be highly qualified, because the low-income schools tend to be the first ones to have not highly qualified. Head Start programs for low-income 3 to 5-year-olds have a whole child focus. Teachers collaborate with parents, health and social workers, and then free or reduced lunch families 185% at the federal poverty level or below. And here's what number 5 is going to be. You're going to embellish every one of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll say this one here you can do it if you want, but 1, 2, 3, and 4 is more information. You need to look these up. There's more information in the textbook. You can use the textbook. You don't need a link, but I want you to better understand those. Okay, so that's number 5, and let's go take a look at what they are. Okay, federal legislation that seeks to provide an influx of financial support to schools, support students with low-income families, and goal of making up some of the educational disadvantages. We have low incomes at all levels of education. African American, Hispanic, and American Indian students are more likely than white or Asians to attend high poverty schools. And again, as I showed you before, there's more white kids in poverty, but percentage-wise not. And that's always a little interesting. That says well as the system are more likely than white, Asian, and highly poverty schools, which make them eligible for federal funds. I say there's more white ones, but percentage-wise, so it doesn't, kind of bothers me. It doesn't fit their narrative, but I'm telling you, there's more white kids in poverty than others. It just by percentage of, the disrepresentation of these other groups. A lower representation of white kids, but absolutely more. Urban areas have twice as many high poverty schools as suburban areas, and you knew that too. Our inner cities tend to be just more cluttered with them. Section summarizes some of the programs likely encountered in these schools. Title I here goes through it. I'm going to let you study this and bring this in. And again, I say on this here, a nice report on here, at least 2 sentences for each one of what they're about. And Head Start is here. I have a relative, in fact, I'll say it's a close relative that was involved with Head Start. Designed for children on low-income families by addressing the needs of the whole child, in addition to educating 3 and 5-year-old children. To also work with social workers, nurses, other health professionals. Teachers and social workers have periodic home visits to work with parents in this. And here was what my relative thing was, is the house was a mess, and that's what they heard every time this person they came was, clean this up. It wasn't a safe environment for kids. And so that was a great involvement for them, because they didn't hear that. They didn't see it that way. Nobody ever said that to them, and they were obviously a little put out by it. And I wish I could say it changed everything. It didn't. Head Start children receive breakfast and lunch daily at school, free, of course, along with the work and academic skills Head Start. So they're identified by income, and they start out on they work with academics, but they really focus on the whole family, the whole child, because often it's a family problem. Then free reduced lunches, as you know, it talks about this has been around forever, and it says 185% of poverty right here. I want you to bring that in. It's $42,000 for a family to qualify for this. So anything under $42,000, which is quite a high number when you consider most of our teachers don't make that. And so I can say to you that I got free lunch when I was growing up back in the 60s, because my family didn't begin to meet the poverty guidelines. That serve free lunches also have breakfast, fruits, milk, and like that. Continue providing food through the summer. The summer program's now free meals. I know in Sioux Falls now anybody, and this is all federal money, any kid can come and get the free lunches in the summer. And that was last summer, was the first time here in Sioux Falls that anybody of school age could show up and get a free lunch. And as I told you, now in Boston, I heard in Dallas, Texas also, they're now providing free breakfast and a free lunch to all the kids in the district, and all of the Boston school district and all the Dallas school district, and I'm sure there's others across the country. The only thing I would say is, where's that money coming from? But somebody else is paying. You get a free lunch now and free summers. And this is interesting too. You know this too, but in our large districts, a disproportionate number are eligible for this. And again, the reason is these big districts tend to include more low-income things. So this, let me see if I've covered that. Yes. So children left alone after school is another big part of children, communicating with parents, working with families. Most single parents work outside the home, and many two-parent families both work, as it does in this family that I'm part of. Less working parents have been lucky enough to have a job that supports a flexible schedule, allows them to be home with children, not school. They have to go to after school. As a result is children of all ages being left alone in their care of others. Parents worry about their safety of children after school. I'm going to suggest something here. Let's have this a robust discussion about this. Then why don't we match the school day to the work day? Okay, I hear this all the time. So here, I'm going to go to our page here, and I'm going to ask you that question. Here's what we're going to have a robust discussion. Okay, why don't we match the school day to the work day? And again, let's have a nice go wherever you want on this, but you gotta participate in this. Why this is. Match the work, and think of all the problems that would alleviate if we'd match the work day to the school day. And this whole section would go away. And all I'm saying is till 5 o'clock. And they could be picked up. So just like you drop your kids off at school on the way to your job, why couldn't you pick them up from school, that they're involved with school, orchestrated by the school, not after school, not walking home, anything like that, but there's some kind of orchestrated school activity till 5 o'clock. Wouldn't have to be rigorous academics, but the school would orchestrate the thing. Not after school programs, not parents, not latchkey kids, simply the school. And maybe we could improve learning. Nobody talks about that. Try and find something anywhere about improved learning from that. Right here, because most of us had to pay a fee to have our children in child care, especially if you don't have relatives that can do it. And they give you a number here, 138 a week. I know I paid more than that when my kids were in daycare, after school programs. Children who are responsible for their own care after school experience more accidents and injuries. They also are at risk to behavior problems, low social competence, poor academic performance. And here was one of the things when my kids got to middle school, finally, they were in sports. And so every day they had something to do after school, either a game or practice or something like that. And so it was a rhythm, it was a routine, and they, at a young age, my kids got to go home and be by themselves. I still, even though they're one's in high school, middle school, I still don't like it when they're home by themselves after school. I would still rather be here or have some kind of supervision because of just what they're talking about here, that the likeliness of these risky activities, smoking, drinking, drugs, sex, all this incidence is way higher. Do you realize the highest crime time for middle school kids is from 3:30 to 5. Middle school kids commit more crimes in the age of between the time of 3:30 and 5:30 than any other time of the day. Okay, that's why I think we should have school orchestration until 5 o'clock. But you push against it. You decide what you think. Educators should be sensitive to realities faced by children that are left alone, sometimes frightened at home alone, especially if they have no siblings. Home can be dangerous and scary in neighborhoods, and drugs being sold, peers, and that's another thing that would take care of that is, at least for a big part, would be that if we stayed there. Sold and peers tempting one another to misbehave. Adolescents may be tempted to experiment with drugs, sex while adults are not around. Television may become the babysitter. My thing is my kids come home as they raid the cupboards and eat garbage. I get home to cook a meal for them and they're not hungry. Because they've raided the cupboards and stuff, and that's why I don't like it when they're home, because I want to feed them a good meal. I know that's whiny, but that's the way it is. Okay, packed after school, stay with relatives, fend for themselves, accidents, behavior problems, poor academics, more likely to smoke, drink, use drugs, and you can put this one on here, and sex at that time. Should be sensitive to these realities. What number was that? That was number 6. You get to add that on here. Right. And dangers children and youth face. Let's take a look at that. And this is what they're going to talk about: child abuse, neglect, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, and cyberbullying, and suicide. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. I'm going to ask you to do this and carry this. Number 7 is these dangers: child abuse, neglect, harassment. I'm going to give you a little bit, but that you will fill this out yourself, number 7. And let me give you this, and I want to see clearly what you have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of those. Most children have probably been faced with angry parents who raise their voice or even spank them on occasion. I'm going to ask you about this, and don't get all freaked out about this, but I'm going to say, were you spanked? Been spanked on occasion. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on our page here at the bottom, and it looks like this. Just pull everywhere, and there's a little number right here that you're going to put in the thing. So you go pick up your phone and go to texting, and in the texting, who it's to now, you put this top little number in here, 22. It's hard for me to see it here. 22333. So I put that in here, 22333, and then in the message you put this number for yes, and this number for no. And so I'm going to do it to show you how it works. I send it. It acknowledges that it's been sent. And there it is. So yes, I was spanked. And again, I don't want to freak you out with this or anything, but this is what I'm going to say just to get a feel. And it's all the classes. I teach several sections, and it'll all show up on here. And just see how many were spanked. Now, my kids, I can remember spanking each of them once. And they're now, as I'm recording this, they're 13 and 15. And I can only remember spanking each of them once. And I can remember my little guy was about 3 at the time, and he would not go to bed. He was horsing around, and I gave him a good spank. And he was kind of whimpering. Come in there later, and he said, "Dad, you don't take very good care of me." And so it was kind of a funny moment, but he would say, yes, he was spanked. But you respond to this. How many of you were spanked as children? That would correspond to the textbook here, and that is no way deal where we're going. However, some family members seriously hurt children. Child abuse is reported annually from more than 3 million children. More than 84 children per hour are treated in emergency rooms. 1 in every 109 children is the victim of abuse. Again, seems high to me. Most 4 in 5 victims of abusing from neglect, and I think that's a very a good one, and I've told you that before, but the number one type of abuse is neglect, what means the child is not being provided his or her basic needs. And here's the thing with that. You will have to decide at what level of neglect is too much, because once you report, you can't really unring a bell. And so you decide. It was my biggest challenge in this area is kids coming, and kids, it seems like kids that I worked with are always hungry, but the one that I couldn't come to grips with is when they were dirty, unbathed, and clothes weren't washed. And I'll tell you a quick story. One time I took a jacket off a kid wore his jacket in the same pants. He had a starter shirt, starter jacket, a nice pair of jeans, wore the same ones day after day after day, and they just got ranker and ranker. And finally I said to him, "Matt, if you got to keep doing this, we're going to have to wash them here in school." And I was a special ed teacher, taught in a classroom that had a washer and dryer in it. And the next day it was just as bad, and I physically took the jacket and washed it. It was a Dallas Cowboy jacket, and it was so gross. I'll tell you how bad it was. When the drug dogs came through, they marked his locker, and they couldn't find any drugs in there, but they felt that it was on the clothes, on the coat that he had in the locker. So he fought me, and it was a real battle to the point where he took a swing at me. But I washed it. I don't know if I'd do it again today, but this was 20 years ago. I washed it and dried it. He came in after school, and he could not believe how white it was. He went to tears on how good it looked, and he apologized for getting so mad and stuff. But it was, looking back, I thought it was the right thing. What I didn't realize at the time is what a shot at his dignity it was, especially in front of other kids. But he was very happy. But he was neglected. And a long story short, I had a lot of history with this kid. There was no washer and dryer in this family's home. There wasn't anything in their home. And so at the time I thought it was the right thing. I wouldn't do it again, but at the time I thought it was the right thing. But he was neglected. And that's the biggest one, and that will be your challenge. Some of these other ones are easy for you to see and report. But this one is hard, because what you're going to find is kids will come from homes where that's normal to look like that and be unfed and not taken care of. And the other, my bigger thing was, I've talked to you before about, was that nobody made them go to bed. They went to bed whenever they wanted to, and they got up, often were late for school or very tired in school. They were neglected that way, and I'm still, my kids are older, and I'm still pretty rancorous about their bedtime. Goes on here, more than 1 in 3 of all victims are under 18-year-old. High school girls, 11% are sexually abused. Boys, 5% sexually abused. Sensational news stories of abuse of children by strangers, but abusers generally are family members or intimate partners, friends, and acquaintances. And the number one group is mother's boyfriend. Tends to be who abuses these girls, but it doesn't play real well, so we don't talk about that. But a lot of it unreported. But you have a responsibility, and it comes down here. Not reporting could lead to fines and prison terms, and so I'm going to ask you to include that here under child abuse about the requirements to report, mandatory reporting of abuse. And what I'm going to say is, you come in here and put in here